Hi and welcome to another video from me, Mark Carp of the Northwest Carp and Anglers Diary Fishing blog. Today we're going to look at jig fishing for beginners. So if you never tried jig fishing before, you think you might want to give it a go. Maybe you're a carp angler, you've just given up for the winter and you still want to get a couple of hours fishing in. Jig fishing on the canal is a great way of doing it. So I'm going to look at a couple of jig heads. We're going to go through what they are. We're going to look at a couple of soft plastic lures that would get you started, and I'll look at jig fishing in general on a very basic level. So stay tuned for that, and we'll start with the jig head itself. Okay, so a jig head. What exactly is a jig head? Well, this is. You can see that. It's a hook, and the hook has a right angle there. Okay, so it's not just a normal straight hook where you'd have an eye on the end. It's angled. Okay, and the hook goes in a jig, it's set in a jig, and molten lead is poured around there so it creates a ball of weight. Okay, and that's basically what a jig is, and we mount soft plastics on that for lure fishing, and a jig gives it weight, and you can fish it down near the bottom. Because it's right angled and the weight's here, when you tie your line on there and it falls through the water, the line going to your rod, the hook's always on top. Okay, so you can knuckle drag these along the bottom, and they're really good. Okay, so it's measured in two different ways. Weight of the jig in grams. Okay, so you'll hear people talking about, say, a 2, a 3, a 5 gram weight, and hook size. Now, hook size for like lure fishing that I'm doing today, 1, 0, 2, 4, 6 and 8. They're the general hook sizes you use for light lure fishing with soft plastics between 1 and 4 inches. Okay, generally I use probably 6, 4 and 2 the most for lures between 1 and 3 inches. So that's a jig head. That's a big one, that's 10 grams. It's merely for demonstration purposes today. I wouldn't use anything like that on the canal, and there is a reason for that, and we'll talk about that next. Okay, so why wouldn't I use a 10 gram jig head for light lure fishing? Well, in light lure fishing there's a general rule of thumb that says stay low to go slow. Okay, and what that means is keep the jig head as low a weight as possible, because when you're pulling that back through the water, a heavy jig head will have to be wound in faster. Okay, and you want your lure to go as slow as possible. You've got to keep it in the take zone, down where the fish will have it. A slow target is an easy target for the fish, so you want a lighter jig head. This is more like the one I'd use. That's, I think, a size 4 hook, and the jig head is 3 grams. And you can say, for argument's sake, you wanted to keep a bait 6 inches off the bottom, you could wind that a lot slower than a 10 gram. Okay, to keep it in place. So the slower the lure goes, the better the target it is for the fish. So stay low to go slow is my motto, and that's something you should always remember. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I don't use jig heads that are over 3 grams in weight. So it's 1 to 3 grams for me on the canal. So that's it for jig heads. Remember, the hook size will be 2, 4, 6, 8, and in grams between 1 and 5, let's say. I certainly don't go over 5 grams for light lure fishing, and hook sizes 1, 0 down to 8, but generally 2, 4 and 6. Okay, so that's your jig head. As you can see on this little one as well, you tie it off there where the eye of the hook is, and it's right angled, all right angled like that. This is called a ball jig head. Now, you can get others, you can get things called flex heads and stuff like that, but for most of your lure fishing this will do. As it's a starter video, we'll stick to this one and we'll cover the others another time. Okay, so ball jig head. So let's take a look at some of the soft shads we'll use, and we'll try rigging one up. Okay, that's coming next. Okay, so there's an awful lot of lures you can rig on a jig head. These are a few of them. Okay, this one is what we call a shad. It's got a paddle tail and a long body. That's a 2-inch copy to in red, and the hook will go through there. The jig head will, ball jig head will be there, the hook will come out here, and that will be drawn back, and the paddle tail at the back will thrash about. If you can work that slowly, it looks like an injured fish, and an injured fish is an easy target. And in coloured water, the paddle sends off vibrations, and if the water's coloured, even with coloured water, the fish can home in on the vibrations, and you can still catch even in coloured water with these kind of things. But they're brilliant baits. A shad bait is basically an imitation fish of some kind. Okay, and the way they work, let me just get my jig head back that I showed you before, the little 3 gram one. Okay, here's the 3 gram jig head. Now, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to take this in my right hand, and that's the rubber shad, that's the top of the fish, that's the belly at the bottom, and you just go in through the nose with the hook, because it's soft. It feels like latex, these rubber shads. You call them rubber, just soft plastics, but they're like latex, and you just feed the hook round. Okay, and pull it out further down the fish, and then just push into place, and that's it. As you can see, that's now rigged. Jig head's on, hooks out the top. You tie your line on there. As a general rule for perch fishing, I'll use fluorocarbon if there's no pike around. Otherwise, put a wire trace on. You can crimp a wire trace on there, or twist it, or put some kind of snap lock on it or something. I use something called a fast snap for mine, so I can quick change them, but I'll come to them later. Okay, so that's the shad, and it's rigged up, and that's it, ready to go. You tie that to your fluorocarbon line, which I've got on here. I've got a different type of lure on this setup at the moment, but you can see the fluorocarbon coming off here. This particular one is a crayfish. It's a crazy fish, nimble. This one, it looks like a bit like a crayfish, which I'll knuckle drag along the bottom. But you can see it's on a jig head. That's a 1 gram jig head with a size 6 hook and a 1.5 inch lure. And there is my little clip, my fast snap. There you go. You can see it better against the black and white coat. That's my fast snap. So I can just clip that on and off at the snap and change to a copy 2 shad with ease. Okay. So crayfish imitations are another good lure. You can get things called tubes, imitation flies, stuff like that. There's all sorts of things you can rig on a jig head. Okay, but mainly the best starting point really is a small fish imitation, a small shad. They work pretty well. Okay, so another lure you should have in your box besides crayfish and rubber shads is this one. This is a curly tail, yellow one. It's on a very, very light jig head. It's only 1 inch one, this 1.5 inch. It looks like the body of a grub, and it's got this little curly rubber tail at the back, and you can do that straight retrieve with that. The tail will flap about at the back, look like it's swimming, or you can switch it up off the bottom and let it flutter down again and down. And they're generally the 2 types of retrieve you'll use when you start, just like jig it up and down, or just a straight retrieve. Try both, and swap your lures around, do both retrieves on those, and eventually you'll find the fish and start catching them. That's basic starter point. So that's a nice one, that curly tail grub works really well. Okay, so you've got a shad, curly tail grub, and a crayfish of some kind. They're the 3 lures I would start lure fishing with. Okay, they're basics to get you going, if you like. Okay, so now you've seen the basics of the jig heads and the rubber shads, let's take a look at the gear I've got today. I've got a rod, 0.5 to 8 grams, very light. The weight rating of the rod relates to the size of the jig heads it will take. Okay, so 0.5 to 8. I'm generally using 1 to 3 grams. You know, my rod's well within its limit. Okay, the reel Daiwa Exceller, little 1000 size, lovely beautiful reel. It's got a lovely smooth clutch on it. I've got Braid on mine, yellow in colour. I don't think it matters what colour the braid is, to be honest. You can get it in green or orange, but I've got yellow on today. At the business end, at the moment I've got this little crayfish on that you saw before, which I can swap out for anything else. I can put on a curly tail grub, cockatoo shad, anything, but I'm starting with a crayfish today. Obviously I've got fluorocarbon. The fluorocarbon's attached to the braid via what I call a shock leader knot. Now I'll put that on at the end of the video, the shock leader knot, because I've already covered it before. I use it in my carp fishing for fishing at range, and it's great for attaching braid to mono. Shock leader knot it's called, and it will be on at the end of the video, so watch out for that. Okay, right, I think we better do some fishing, don't you? Let's see if we can get a fish on this mad looking crayfish. Okay, so curly tail grubs, rubber shads of some kind like the cockatoo, crayfish nimbles, or any kind of crayfish imitation. They all reasonably work the same way. They're the 3 lures I would start with for jig fishing. Get those 3 in your box. Use a straight retrieve or twitch them along the bottom. You know, vary your retrieve when you use them. Try all 3. Experiment with different colours. Try not to get too into buying lures because it's addictive. You can literally end up spending a fortune on them. I didn't actually want to buy any lures this year, and I've ended up with more. So I've ended up with another lure box as well. Just bought this one. So be careful because it can get addictive. So now you've seen the 3 basics, let's go and see if we can catch some fish. Okay, so first perch of the year. Just fallen to the old crayfish. I've been fishing a couple of minutes and wham, straight in. That's a decent start. Happy with that. Quite often struggle on this stretch, like, so that's a great start. Let's get him back. And one tip I will give you, if you're jig fishing, if you're fishing the same area, use your landing net. That's a bit of a keep net. Don't release a fish. But if you're going to keep fishing the same spot, because if you're fishing in a shoal and one's been caught, quite often it can spook the rest. So I'm going to put him in my landing net and dip it in the edge. And I'm going to try the same area and see if we can get another one out. Okay, so it's been net set up. I'll just drop this in the edge. Check my bait. Oh, my crayfish has slid down a bit there, so I'll just put that back. In fact, I'm going to re-rig this. Okay, so I'll take the hook out. That's a good thing about soft plastics as well, is that you can just pull the hook out and put it back in again. So I'm going to go in through there, feed it round, come out near the bottom, and then just, yeah, not far enough, go back in, come out further round. And there we go, it's hooked and ready to go again. So you can re-rig your soft plastics anytime you want. And that should be good for another fish. Let's see if we can catch one. Right, here we go. Fish number 2 of the day. Another perch. Not quite as big as the first one, but it'll do. I've just been joined by Chris, one of my viewers. So he's going to be on camera shortly. We're going to see if we can get him a perch or 2. As you can see, they are loving these crayfish. That's a lure it's just taken. And yep, jig fishing. If you've never done it before, it's not that hard. I'm going to see if we can get Chris a fish or 2. So as you can see, I've had a couple of fish today already. Behind me is one of my viewers, that's Chris, and we're going to try and get him a perch. So he's literally just started lure fishing, so if we can get him something today, that'd be great. So I'm going to concentrate on Chris for a while, so you're not going to see me catching many more fish. But the little crayfish I've been using, I've had a couple already, as you've seen. And hopefully I've set Chris up with one as well, so hopefully he'll get one too. So let's see how Chris gets on. Not quite what we're after. Chris has got his first perch. Let's go and have a look.
First perch of the day.
Yeah. Well done, mate. I believe that is your first light lure fishing perch.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Right. Do you want to get him unhooked, mate? Let's get him in the net with the rest. That's the I've set Chris up with little 1.5 inch crayfish, the same as I'm using, and he's just going to pop him in the net. Oh, here we go. There's another one. The size seems to be getting smaller. But yeah, another one bites the dust. And again, it's on the old little crayfish. So we're doing well today. Get him in the net.
And again.
And another one for you as well. Well done, mate. We're doing alright. I wonder if it's got anything to do with the light levels. Because it just seems to be starting to fade a little bit, doesn't it? It's gone a bit darker. And maybe coming on because it's dusk. Or do you think it's dusk? I don't know.
Pine lighting for lights.
Yeah, that's right. And another one. They're not very big, but as you can see, he's mullered that crayfish. There we go. Let's put him in the net with the rest. Well, time's moving on, and it's weighing time for me. There's the fish we've had today. As you can see, we've had about 10, up to about 3/4 of a pound.
bigger, more.
Well, we're ending with a small one. There we go. Seen loads of these on my videos before, haven't you? But that little crayfish nimble. Even the small ones will have a go at it. So I'm going to pop him in the net. Me and Chris are going to carry on fishing for the rest of the day. But that's it for now for jig fishing. So you've seen the jigs, you know what they're all about: hook size, weight size, and why we try and stay low to go slow, especially in winter, because the fish are cold-blooded and their body temperature is only just above that of the water, so when it's cold they don't really want to chase. So stay low to go slow and use as small a jig head as you can. Get yourself some crayfish, some rubber shads or soft plastic shads, and some curly tail grubs. I haven't used them today, we've just concentrated on the crayfish just to get Chris some fish, and he's caught, I've caught, we've done well. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, check out my community tab as well, and join us on the live feeds on Wednesday night. So take care of yourself, tight lines.